Hello, I'm Scott Woodwiss and welcome to highlights of the 2013 Thrustmaster Formula Sim Racing World Championship. Round 6 of the championship takes us to the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. Seen as the home of British motorsport, Silverstone is one of Grand Prix racing's classic venues, comprised mostly of high-speed corners coupled with fast straights, and the recently added arena section helping to increase overtaking opportunities. The main focus will be on aerodynamic efficiency and stability, as well as keeping tyre wear to a minimum across 52 laps of the 5.9km course. Woodwiss shook off the controversy of Canada to grab his third pole position of the season. Behind him on the grid came two drivers making their return to FSR with Twister Racing. Eduard looked to repeat his 2011 win here and lined up alongside Woodwiss on the front row, while third went to Frenchman Samuel Lebert in his first race in the championship for 3 years. Fourth would go to Martin Gosby ahead of Eduard and Jack Keithley, putting all 4 precision cars in the top 6. Yannick Lapchan would once again make the shootout to start 7th, with the Netrex duo of Dejan Kostadinov and Patrick de Wit in 8th and 9th, and Filip Puška once again rounded out the top 10. Further back, an uncomfortable Jurnej Simoncic had to settle for 13th. Carlos Martin made his WC debut for Biocross Positive in 18th behind teammate Blair Disley, and as for Morgan Morand, he would start from the back of the grid due to an administration penalty from Canada. When the lights went out, Woodwiss made his customary clean start to lead into the first corner, while Martin Gosby got the jump on Lebert and immediately began to pressure Kirchhoff. Gosby held the outside line through Copse and carried enough speed to claim second, with Calames almost following him past into third. As for Lebert, his poor start had dropped him back to 6th behind Keithley. Dejan Kostadinov would suffer problems of a different kind as he lost his front wing by hitting the back of Lapchan's Pescara. As the 22-strong pack charged onto the hangar straight for the first time, there were battles galore for track position, as Gergo Baldi relieved Lapchan of 7th with an outside pass at Stowe, before Jurnej Simoncic did the same 1 corner later at Vale for 8th. With the opening lap complete, the order ran as Woodwiss, Gosby, Kirchhoff, Calames, Keithley, Lebert, Baldi, Simoncic, Puška and de Jong. As for Morgan Morand, he had made a superb start and took 8 places by the end of lap 1 to go from the back of the grid to 14th. Morand continued his charge by making a brave pass on Zsolt Nagy into Maggots to take 13th place. Into Vale, he made an outside pass on Patrick de Wit to move into 12th, and just a few corners later dived inside of Yannick Lapchan at Village Corner for 11th. After just a lap and a half, the Frenchman had passed half the field. On to lap 3, and Morand was allowed through by teammate Filip Puška at Stowe to move into the top 10, and he didn't waste time to close onto the fight for 8th between de Jong and Baldi. As he had done with Lapchan, Morand passed Baldi at Village to move into 9th, before slipstreaming de Jong down the Wellington Straight to set him up for a pass into Brooklands for 8th. An incredible charge which seemed to prove he was in with a shout for a podium. Lap 4, and Morand still wasn't finished. Simoncic made way for the go-speed exiting Copse to push Morand into 7th place. Next up was fellow Frenchman Samuel Lebert, and after waiting patiently behind the twister for a few corners, Morand pounced at the loop to move past Lebert and completed an incredible sequence of overtakes to go from last to 6th after just 5 laps. Simoncic once again became the first to pit on lap 6, with the soft compound tyres only expected to have a range of around 7 laps. Morgan Morand made his first stop a lap later, giving a clear explanation of his blistering pace in the opening laps as his soft tyres had reached the end of their life. He rejoined in 16th, but more importantly in plenty of clean air, allowing him to continue his fight to the front. After a few laps of trouble-free racing, Eduard Calames became the first hard tyre runner to make his first stop. But on pit exit, he found Morgan Morand sweeping through into a net 5th position. Eduard would find himself in the exact same situation exiting his stop, as Morand powered past to move into a theoretical 4th place. With the rest of the front runners making their first stops over the next few laps, it left the Brem GP duo out in front, with Gergo Baldi leading and Zsolt Nagy third, with Filip Puška sandwiched in between. Woodwiss had rejoined in 4th, still ahead of Martin Gosby, but with Morgan Morand now keeping both drivers in his sights and bringing Atze Kirchhoff with him. At the front, Gergo Baldi continued to lead, with some wondering just how long he'd be able to go before his first stop. They got their answer when Baldi made a major mistake exiting Village and couldn't find the track again quick enough, handing the lead back to Woodwiss. Baldi managed to stay with Woodwiss down the Wellington Straight and appeared to put the Precision under pressure, but his tyres couldn't handle any more punishment, forcing Baldi to abort his attempt and pit at the end of the lap. Teammate Zoltan Nagy also did the same thing on the same lap, but both had certainly proven that Brem GP were in contention for points this afternoon. It wasn't long after when the Silverstone circuit claimed its first big scalp of the race. Atze Kirchhoff had been in pursuit of Morgan Morand ever since his first pit stop, but on lap 23 the outside curb at Club Corner proved to be his downfall, as it sent him flying across the anti-cut and straight into the barrier. For him, it was race and comeback over. With Kirchhoff now out of the picture, it was Woodwiss who continued to control the pace at the front, just ahead of Martin Gosby and Morgan Morand, who was now unchallenged in 3rd place. Eduard held 4th ahead of Jack Keithley in 5th, who had Samuel Lebert for company just behind in 6th. Simoncic once again was first to the pits for his second stop from 7th, leaving Baldi, Pushka, Lapshan and Nagy to round out the top 10. Morand was next to pit, running a strategy that was out of sync to the rest of the field due to starting from the back. The stop itself was trouble-free, but it was his exit that forced his race to come unstuck. In his overexcitement, Morand spun his go speed and ended up facing in the wrong direction. His attempts to correct his mistake caused him to become wedged in the pit exit, and much to his and the team's disbelief, it was enough to sadly see him retire once again. On track, the closest battle was the scrap for 4th between Keithley and Lebert. The Frenchman was proving he'd lost none of his skill despite a 3-year absence, and this was proved when he once again made a pass inside of Stowe. The move was done, Keithley was helpless, and Lebert was up to 4th. Keithley would make his second stop at the end of the lap. Lebert then made his a few laps later, but unbelievably, as he exited, Keithley retook track position in front of him. Less than impressed, Lebert tried an outside pass at Stowe, but with the GT Omega's tyres fully up to temperature, Keithley had no problem hanging on to the place. But as they started the next lap, Lebert saw an opening into Copse and grabbed it, once again leaving Keithley to do nothing but watch the Twister drive away from him. Woodwiss and Martin Gosby then made their second stops with enough pace and gap to retain 1st and 2nd on the road. Then the unthinkable happened. Out in front, the spectators couldn't believe their eyes when the precision of Woodwiss began to slow dramatically on the Hanger Straight. It turned out to be a major electrical failure for the champion, and unbelievably it meant that as a result, Woodwiss had suffered his first retirement from a race since Suzuka in 2011. It left the entire venue in a complete state of shock. This had now promoted GT Omega's Martin Gosby into the lead of his home Grand Prix, sending the British fans into rapturous celebrations. But, as he was a championship contender in the World Series Division 1 tier below, Gosby now had a major decision to make. Drop back in the field and maintain his WS Championship status, or throw caution to the wind and score his first World Championship victory. It was clear that Gosby had some thinking to do, with 13 laps remaining. On to the final stops for soft tyres, beginning with just 10 laps to go. All eyes were on Martin Gosby, as he still had his moral dilemma to resolve. He finally made his move on lap 45, and rejoined in 2nd behind Lebert, who was yet to pit again. Crucially, Gosby had rejoined still ahead of Calames, keeping everyone guessing about what he had in mind. At the end of the following lap, Lebert made his dive for the pits, but strangely Gosby followed him in, just a lap after his own final stop. Instead of taking more tyres, Gosby appeared to have given himself a drive-through on purpose, and in the process, Calames drove past to take the lead. While it spoiled the results, it was clear what Gosby's intentions were. Gosby needed 4th place to satisfy the rules, and on the penultimate lap, he duly reduced his pace and allowed Lebert through into 2nd at Vale. But behind him, a battle was raging for that 4th place between Baldi, Keithley and Simoncic. Learning his lesson from his earlier fight with Nagy, Keithley waited patiently for a mistake, and when Baldi struggled for traction exiting the loop, he saw his chance and swept through on the inside of Brooklands, making Gosby's task that little bit easier. On to the final lap, and Gosby slowed further to allow the trio to catch up, but the three cars were still battling hard, meaning Gosby had to pick his moment to slot in behind Keithley very carefully. Eventually, Keithley caught his teammate exiting club and luckily produced enough of a gap for Gosby to fall into. While Gosby could have won the race, he knew in his own mind he'd made the right decision. So, in a race where the favourites to win failed to go the distance, it was left to Eduard to quietly and calmly bring it home to score his second career victory in the World Championship and his first as a precision driver. The Estonian had also extended his podium streak and was putting himself into a brilliant position in the championship to capitalise should the likes of Woodwiss and Morand trip up once again. Samuel Lebert marked his FSR comeback with a fantastic drive after a shaky start to finish second for Twister Racing. And despite being handed third on the final lap by his teammate, Jack Keithley was pleased to return to the podium for GT Omega for the first time since Australia. But as has been the case this season, events didn't stop after the checkered flag dropped. In post-race scrutineering, Samuel Lebert was disqualified for a major technical infringement found on his Twister Racing car in post-race scrutineering, losing his second place. Interestingly, it not only moved Jack Keithley into second, but also Martin Gosby into third, causing a major headache for Gosby, his team and the stewards, as it now remains to be seen what will happen to his World Series status. Away from the controversy and outside the top three, Jurnej Simoncic stole what turned out to be fourth place on the final lap from Gergo Baldi, who put in a gutsy drive nonetheless to secure a top 5 finish. In contrast, Filip Puška just missed out, but continued his points run in 6th. Behind Puška, there were penalties for Patrick de Wit, Yannick Lapshan and Blair Disley for separate incidents, causing a reshuffle from 7th downwards. Zsolt Nagy inherited 7th ahead of Ash Racing stand-in driver Dimitri de Matos in 8th, while Netrex rounded out the top 10, with de Wit ending up 9th after his penalty, and Kostadinov promoted to 10th to salvage a point after losing his front wing at the start. Not only did Calames secure victory today, but the result also sees him move into the championship lead, making it the first time that a driver other than Bono Huis has topped the standings since Melbourne last season. Puška's points today also see him leapfrog teammate Morand, who has now failed to score for the past 2 races and desperately needs points to remain a championship contender, especially as Keithley has moved to within a point of 4th place. Simoncic has jumped to 6th, 4 points ahead of de Wit and a further 7 ahead of Nilsson, and Kostadinov isn't far off either, 3 points back in 9th. And thanks to his promotion to 3rd today, Gosby now sits at the bottom of the top 10. How this will affect his World Series campaign should be decided before the next round. In the Constructors, Precision continue to lead, now just 1 point off the 200 mark. Gosby consolidate their 2nd place, while GT Omega's double podium catapults them to 3rd. The fight for 4th is now a 4-way duel, with Twister, Brem GP, Netrex and Ash Racing all separated by 5 points, and Netrex and Ash Racing in a tie for 6th. Pescara and Biocross are still locked together for 8th, and Fast and Speed and Jasco Spain PSR continue as this season's backmarkers. The series takes a 3-week break before the next round, which is the German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. You can watch that race live as it happens by heading to SimRace TV on July the 7th. Qualifying takes place at 4:15 GMT and the race starts at 5 o'clock. Until then, it's a great time to sign up to the FSR Fantasy League for your chance to win Thrustmaster prizes. Just head to fantasy.formula-simracing.net for more details. As always, you can go to racedepartment.com for more league information, and you can follow FSR on both Facebook and on Twitter. We hope you've enjoyed today's highlights. I'm Scott Woodwiss, and we'll see you next time for round 7 of the 2013 Thrustmaster Formula Sim Racing World Championship.